Hello, everybody. We'll get started in just a minute. I dropped a link to our agenda in the chat. Please sign in and add any opens. A couple business items I need to get worked out this morning, and then we would like to focus on the personas and areas of focus for this plan. So we'll get started in just a minute. Alrighty, it's 2 after the hour. I'm sure we'll have some more folks roll in. Welcome to the July 20th edition of the Best SIG, the Education SIG. Do we have any new friends to the group that wanted to introduce themselves? Doesn't look like it. Looks like it's all regular cast characters today. Can anyone assist in scribing today, please?
I can help you scribe.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that. A couple opens. I am going to be out next week. I'll be on a boat. And I was wondering if someone is interested in helping run the call next week. And if not, we will cancel the call. So do we have any volunteers to lead the call next week? I'll help you get things set up if that is an enticement.
If it weren't like first thing in the morning at 6 a.m., I'd be happy to help, but I don't think I'd be capable at that hour. I apologize.
Okay.
Crobe, I have a conflict right now, but if I can get that cleared up in the next day or two, I will let you know.
All right. Thank you, sir. So pending Dave's availability, we will either hold the meeting or we will cancel for the week and we'll all busily work on homework, except me. I'm going to be on a boat. Just a note. Yes, sir.
Just real quick, if Dave can't or we have any significant agenda items we want to cover next week, certainly you can reach out to me as well.
Oh, thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. Such a helpful group. I love you guys and gals. With the assistance of Khalid and Jennifer, I got all the SIGs we're involved with GitHub repos. So if anyone is interested in helping me populate the readme.md, PRs are welcome. Otherwise, I'll get around to it in my spare time. But that having this filled out is very useful for new people trying to entice them into participate in the SIG. So any assistance there to help me get that up and running as quickly as possible would be super helpful. And then I have to talk with the foundation folks about getting us a mailing list. And I guess we can decide here as a team, do we want to have our own focused education SIG Slack channel? Or do we want to leverage best practices or the Stream One channel? What would be our preference?
I think adopting the existing Stream One channel makes sense. I was just about to jump over there and see if there's been any activity. But the point of these SIGs is to, take those over, is to carry on the torch, so to speak, from those projects. I know there's been nothing there since June 15, so go for it. I would say it's. Right. I can drop the link to it.
Yeah, I'll check with Jennifer and everybody to make sure everyone is provisioned in. Vicky.
I actually would counsel we use the best practices channel for this. Not only is there not a ton of traffic there, but it also would show people in the best practices channel who aren't a part of this group what's going on and kind of entice them to come join us.
Yeah, I've seen Crow even yesterday post some things there about the fact that this group is meeting, and I think they should be notified and the like. So that's certainly fine as well. Does this SIG formally get set up by the best practices working group yet?
Oh yes, we were adopted by the best practices group by an overwhelming vote.
Great. Okay. So yeah, I'm neutral then on whether it's you continue using the Stream One security education Slack channel or the WG best underbar practices underbar OSS dev channel on Slack. Either one of those seems fine, but yeah, just trying to give this group a dedicated space was the point of that other Slack channel. But yeah,
agreed. So, any other thoughts on the matter? Or we could have a third Slack channel.
I think if we all individually had our own Slack channels and then just kind of tagged people in as no, I'm kidding.
That'd be awesome. All right. So if you have other additional thoughts, put them there under the opens. And that way we can make a decision before I head off to my boat and get a note over to Jen and Khalid. Any other opens for today before we proceed?
But I'll actually use my hand up. I'm not quick enough to use the hand up, Mark. Hold on.
Good enough.
In the interest of butting in, I'm just wondering that this is, I suppose, only our third meeting. It's early days for this, but have we a recruitment drive? Are we happy with the amount of people that we have to drive this forward? Have we a gap in skill sets that we need to reach out to people and see, can we get them on board?
Right. Judy's my straight woman.
I'm just
so
because I'm really it's kind of added on to what Vicky suggested of using the existing Slack channel for the best practices group, that some of those may be interested in coming over, but I don't know. Just
so my opinion, today with our current docket of work, I think this is an okay amount of people. We are refining the plan. We've got a lot of notes, and like folks like David are out. He's ill, so he's out. So we have a couple other people that have participated, Marta and Arnaud. So I think we have enough people to help chew through the plan. But the next stage, once we have this plan and we're going to start filling in details. So instead of create training material is like what's currently in the plan, we're going to create training material, bullet point 1 through 50 to document how we're going to do that. And we're going to say, we're going to do blah, blah, and blah. And I'm going to ask for people to commit to either own some of those tasks and go off and do some homework with individual or small groups, and then come back, report back to this group. Or we're going to look for people to go off and try to help enlist additional people. So for the long-term, Judy, we do not have enough folks helping out. This is going to be a lot of work, worthwhile work. You might note there was a meeting at the U.S. White House yesterday focused on cybersecurity education. And I know at least 2 of the speakers talked about this working group.
Yeah, my boss, Jim Zemlin, was there. I don't have a report back other than to say it was, I don't know that there was anything concrete that came out of that meeting. So I'll try to see if I can get a better report back from either him or from David and I or Clyde Seeperstad, who runs training. Certainly lots of interest in what we're doing here and in general in the open source space around education. But I hope we can tap some of that energy for funding and for new participants in this working group and the like. So that's a loop that is on David and I to try to close.
And my boss was in the room. She actually had a seat at the table, she was so excited. Took a picture of her card and sent to me. So she was super enthused about it, and I felt there was a lot of good energy. And yeah, like back at OpenSSF Day, I talked with the 2 gentlemen, Clyde and the other fellow from the LF, about the training. So I think we'll be enlisting additional people. And I think there'll be external folks that will have hopefully a lot to contribute and donate. Like I'm talking with trying to find the right contacts within Intel to see about donating our Intel secure development training, either as a resource for this group to refer to write new content, or as a direct donation to the effort, possibly. And I know, I think Arnaud was going to talk within IBM about maybe doing something similar, because IBM has a really well-developed security education program internally. So we're going to see if there's opportunities for other member organizations to contribute material. But yeah, if you have any friends, anyone that you see that's not on our list here today, feel free to invite people, because we're going to have quite a long laundry list of things we want to achieve, and we need to have people to help make that successful. Have a share.
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm driving. Sorry for the background noise. But is there any interest that I can also make some inquiries inside Microsoft with our strike organization? Is that interesting?
That would be really interesting, yes.
Okay. So I'm going to take that.
Thank you. Yeah, I would ask anyone that works at a large organization that has security development material, see, even if it's just shown to us as a reference, that would be helpful, so we can understand what we're missing today and where we need to focus. I know I'm going to talk to a delightful friend of mine about maybe donating some threat modeling training. But we'll go kind of talk through and see. That's an area we don't have a lot of material on, and I think that could be interesting to share. All right, any additional thoughts before we move on to the real work today? All right, and as always, please go ahead and type it in the notes. Today, I would like to make substantial progress on our targets for this training. Off the cuff, I split up our areas of focus into 3 areas. I think we need to decide what types of learners we want to create and develop and give content to. We need to have a list of institutions or groups we want to engage, and that's going to be an area I'm going to need a lot of help on. So for example, if somebody had contacts within the Department of U.S. Education, for example, that might be that. Maybe you could volunteer some time to try to make some calls to help get folks like that engaged, or Girls Who Code, or any organizations. Then the third area of focus is we need to think about the content delivery channels we ultimately want to start shaping this material into. So we have the 2 classes that David put together that are in now 3 formats. So that's one type of content delivery mechanism. We have SKF, the Security Knowledge Framework, which is a hands-on keyboard type training avenue. So let's think about how we want to provide these classes or materials as we develop them. So let's focus on the learner personas. I scribbled down a handful, and I forgot one that if David was here, he'd yell at me. Why can't I edit the document? That's weird. Well, I'll ask, maybe David can help me. Other David, could you put on that empty bullet managers? Because that came up to us at OpenSSF Day. So I think that's an area we need to find some material and help provide training. So looking at the 5 kind of high level personas, do we agree we want to target content? One group is college and university students.
Yeah, I'll give my 2 cents here. Yeah, I think initially a core curriculum for universities would certainly be an easy, well, maybe not so easy because you have to get them to adopt it. But I mean, at least an area where it's already prevalent as a sideline to cybersecurity for some degree plans might be a good focus, but I don't think it needs to stop there, right? So I mean, my son's in high school, so they have engineering groups in his high school, clubs you can join. They have a very specific path of education, even in high school. So I think the curriculum for both of these places would be the first step in my mind. And that curriculum, that's the one thing. But I think the STEM for underrepresented groups should be the equally important. Which I'm sure someone else will talk to here in a second, but absolutely, I think it'd be an easier win to try and get this adopted, more globally and more recognized, especially given the government kind of funding and everything else. Universities would be a fairly easy one, as they're already subsidized by government. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Before I move on to Judy, I think there's an opportunity to develop this core content, starting with what we have from David's work, and then tailor that to the specific learner audience. So somebody that is a seasoned developer, like I've been developing for 25 years, for example, they probably can skip over some of the basics. Probably. They might want to take it as a refresher, but we probably will need to develop more advanced materials for those types of learners. So I just want to have kind of buckets organized where we want to reflect how we want to specific audiences we want to deliver this thing to. Like managers will need to have a different view of our existing content, but they probably won't be learning about cross-site scripting or buffer overflows, that type of stuff. So Judy, your hand was up next.
Oh yeah, I actually did. I was trying to understand how to create learner personas. So I did read a few documents. I put a link in to, because this is, I'll be honest, like creating this kind of learning persona, it was a new thing to me. So I'm happy to learn about it. But it's more of a matrix for me to just, rather than maybe list, and also how do we prioritize skill sets? Do we want to start with people who know nothing, people who have midstream? I'm still a little bit confused about how to actually tackle this, if that makes sense. I'm happy to say that.
No, well, and I don't know that anyone here is a professional educator. Okay. I think that's probably something we need to lean into. Like Brian mentioned, there are people that work on education within the LF. But we probably need to talk to people that do education for a living and kind of see how we need to adjust our plans and targets. But I agree. And thank you for the link. I think that's going to be helpful.
That's only one. It was really just some quick research for myself and best approaches to how to come about this. But I'm still wondering, from the top down, is there rumblings of where we would like to have our biggest impact? Are we looking at industry? Are we looking at outside of industry, college, younger generation, to bring them up? Because the range is so vast.
It is very vast. And I think in order for us to make any progress, we're going to need to focus on we're not going to be able to serve everybody. But we've mentioned like underserved communities is something that we all value very much. Like you're trying to get young ladies and racially and mentally diverse people into the field. So I think that's definitely a target area for us. Collegiate academic university, I think, is an area we'll probably want to focus in on. The high school, middle school, the younger students was something that came up in the DC meetings, and that derailed the whole conversation because everybody wanted to talk about teaching young kids about this stuff. And I don't know, that's important, but I personally don't know that that's exactly where we want to focus, because we have a problem today, and it'd be great if we can solve that problem in 10 years as these young learners are going up through school. But I don't know that that's the most important area, but we'll defer to the group and kind of see what everyone thinks about. And then there's always the, kind of like yourself, people that change careers.
Yeah.
And I think that you're seeing a lot of that right now with kind of the work from home push, hybrid work, where people are looking to explore new careers. So I think that's definitely an area we want to try to focus in on. How do we kickstart these people trying to get in? And then the experienced. All right, I'll shut up and yield to Eric.
So could we start with maybe out of scope? Maybe if the group could say.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I think in either case, right, I like David's course is very interesting. It's got a ton of very useful information. It's very comprehensive, but it's not hands-on, right? So it very much is, read and understand. Whereas college students, as an organization that hires a lot of people right out of college, and I've seen this a lot through my career, most of them don't get any education in this. And even with the languages they do learn, it's a semester, and then they learn it and then don't touch it again for, until they actually get a job. That's not to say that a lot of them don't do side projects and other things, but very realistically, the level is not as high. So in either case, be it college, be it continued learning for existing professionals, we need to really start looking at how do we build something that helps those people who learn better by doing. And somebody who's kind of narrowed in on the reality of DevOps being somebody else's job and security being part of the CISO group. And, why would I think about that in my current organization? It's never been my responsibility before. It's educating them and actually showing them the practical reality of how they implement it, right? And from, checking in your code all the way to deployment. So, to some degree, there's tools and best practices, but the education needs to take it to that. This is how you actually hands-on do this. And of course, we've talked about conferences and other things to show this and at some level. And of course, the personas and issues of their 50 different languages to do this with is a much broader conversation. But I think no matter what we do, there has to be an aspect of taking like what David has and actually showing people how to implement it, not just conceptually adopt it.
Absolutely agreed. People learn differently. Some people learn well by reading. Some people learn by taking a class. Many people, especially in our field, learn by doing. Some people like to listen to podcasts. So I absolutely agree, Eric. We need to, and that's where the whole content delivery channels idea is. We need to think about how we can get this content out. And at least for hands-on learning, today we have SKF, and that needs to be augmented for more languages. But are there other things we need to do to get that practical learning aspect addressed? Mr. Russo.
Getting back to personas, I understand the thought process in putting that list together. However, would we be better served by, instead of talking about college student versus high school student versus a job changer, should we talk about novice versus intermediate versus advanced? Because I think those are more applicable across the board and maybe not pigeonholing people based upon where they currently are.
That's definitely one way to do it. Like also like a user journey type thing. We've talked about that in the best practices group. Like I have a specific task, so therefore I'm going to learn how to do the DevOps. So I'm going to take the DevOps piece. So that's, and it's up to the group how we want to divide this up. If we want to go like a collegiate 100, 200, 300 level for novice, intermediate, and expert, we could go user story, user journey. I'm open to however we want to divide this up. Marta.
I will add to what Dave was saying. The good idea of beginning, intermediate, expert. I would turn it also with the aspect of being beginner in security and being a beginner programmer, being an intermediate programmer and being an expert programmer, because you may have a combination of all those three. You may have an expert programmer who is a beginner in security, or you may have an expert in security who's a beginner in programming, right?
That would be, well, not expert, but that would be me. I know not. Excellent feedback. Thank you. Abhishek.
Thanks. One of the practices that my team found very useful, and we are a team of engineers, of software engineers, is the practice of like a structured hackathon. Okay, we call it this practice open hack, and you can think of it as a structured sprint that's around different areas. So for instance, we have a DevSecOps open hack that goes through static code analysis, some dynamic analysis, some using OWASP, Zap. So basically, you get like a number of tasks to do while you sprint, and I think our code for that is actually open source. Do you think that could be like a good reference point that maybe?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yes, I think that would be good. And potentially,
great.
This is an area where we create like a little subcommittee, and we have people go off and figure out what our model is for how we're going to target our training. Then we have another group that goes off and focuses in on writing the training or labs. So we have to figure out how we want to approach this. But yeah, I think that's a good approach, Abhishek.
Great.
Sorry.
Okay. Thanks. So I can take or participate in this track.
Please. That'd be great.
Okay.
And then I noted here at Intel, we use a martial arts metaphor for our training. We have a belt system where I'm a white belt in security development training. And they have different levels of, as you, much like the beginner, intermediate, and expert, as you prove yourself and take tests, you're able to achieve higher levels of success. So that may be another approach we might want to think about. There's a mildly successful training company in the US that leveraged that approach. They borrowed that out, actually took that out of Cisco's program. So do we want, is it too early in the game to kind of vote on an approach there for, beginner, intermediate, expert? Or do we want to continue to suss out additional people we need to target for training?
I think this is one of the first decisions we need to make, because this is going to frame everything else that we do.
All right. And what I will do is I have everyone's email addresses and those that have participated in the past, and I will send out an official vote via email, and I'll get a list created for us eventually, but I have everyone's email. So I'll send out an email and we will take an official vote on an approach. So do we have basically kind of one approach is the personas, another approach is the beginner, intermediate, expert? Are those the two approaches we're thinking about voting on? Any alternative suggestions? Judy agrees. Dave agrees. All right, so that's how I'll frame it, is we'll have basically the persona versus levels vote. And we will, I will give everybody until next Friday. So that'll be the 29th to do their vote. And we will talk about the results of that in our August 3rd call. In the meantime, if you have other targets or suggestions, please put them into this personas areas of focus. let's move on to the next area of focus, like institutions, groups to engage. Do we have suggestions of groups we desire to talk to? So I will put down, we have noted in the document, Girls Who Code. There were several really good organizations we wanted to engage with. The HBCUs. I would like to maybe narrow that down to 3 or 4, perhaps. Any other specific groups we want to engage with, like potentially the U.S. Department of Education might be one, if somebody's interested in herding that cat. David.
What about engaging with a group like IST Squared?
That's on the list.
Okay. Yeah, they have the certification, CSSLP certification, which is exactly what we're talking about here. I'm not sure what materials they may have that they are willing to share, but it probably wouldn't hurt to check.
What's the organization Wheeler keeps talking about? It's not the IEEE. It's some academic group he approached. It's in the notes here somewhere. ACM, ACM and IEEE. Does anyone have any others? And our noted bias is many of us are here in the States, so we are going to suggest US-based things, but our stated purpose is to get this program to be globally focused and provide in many different areas and regions. So if somebody if there was a group focused on education or cybersecurity in a particular nation, Ireland, you may feel free to write that down. That would be awesome. Any suggestions for groups we want to engage with or institute? Like, does anyone have a relationship with a local university we potentially wanted to reach out to? Like, I know one person in the group actually instructs at a university, so that might be a potential avenue. Judy, did you have a suggestion?
Yeah, that's actually a great idea. If people have, we could do POCs with. And I think that's really what we would be really beneficial if we could do a pilot scheme of running to see and create a feedback loop to see how certain students actually found the training. Did they benefit from it? Did it help them about, like, that was actually like, is there a badge available for their LinkedIn profile? Is that really great to put on a CV when they're going for job applications? And also universities, if they feel, they will adapt their training to help hire people. If there's companies that we're working for them, as I mentioned before, I know Red Hat in Waterford, Ireland, work really closely with our university. It's on our doorstep. So they actually train the skills to get their students hired. So, but yeah, I'd be happy to pilot anything with a group of students. We have a cybersecurity course at our local university, which is I'm a graduate from. So, but it's early days for that, but that's definitely something we could keep in mind, and I'd love to do that.
Cool. I know that David is a university instructor. I have relationships with some people in the Cleveland, Ohio area that we can talk to pilot things. I think that's an excellent idea. Once we have our content, we can test it out with some real folks and see if those learners benefit from it. Matt.
Yeah, I've long wondered what the unique aspect or angle that we would have on education as the OpenSSF. And I tell the story of salsa to get people's attention at a general level. And I think that's a unique angle we have. And especially talking about DevSecOps, operations people, and back to our projects like Fresca or whatever it might be, that, and certification wise, I think that people are going to ask if you're SALSA compliant, who's the auditor? How are they certified? What's their education? So I'd love to see that, obviously at more of the higher end, but in some way.
I think that's also another really great thing. We've talked about in a couple of the other working groups of like the best practices. We're advocating a lot of the OpenSSF projects. So I think that's a good hook, Matt, is to talk about the projects we know best. And then certification accreditation is an interesting topic this group will need to address at some point. How do we'll need to figure out how we can reward developers with a certification, kind of what that means. We already do with David's coursework, but if we're expanding the program, what type of oversight or what body do we need to go to, if any, to?
Well, I often get asked, like, people give demos and stuff at various groups saying, we're showing SALSA level 3 and 4 compliance and with our products and stuff like that. So, but there's no way to prove that the person actually went through all the controls and did all the things and stuff like that. So.
And we, at least part of our tactic was you take the class, you're going to take a test, and there would be proof there. But again, I'm not an educator or a certification person, so we'd have to see kind of what, how that holds up. Is that comparable to something like a CISSP or something that's a course or degree you've paid for? So we'll need to kind of investigate that. Is how do we make sure that the ultimate reward with that certificate is recognized by external folks? It's just not a bunch of guys in a garage pumping out some training. Marta.
I have a cultural note here. Not in every culture a certificate has the same worth. There are some cultures it's very important to have the papers and certificates, and other cultures not that much. So because of that, we probably should not just concentrate on giving certificate, because it's not going to work everywhere.
Yeah, I absolutely agreed. And that's an excellent point that, again, we try to focus internationally, and that's something we'll need to be aware of. Certificates or a degree is a way, is not the only way. We've also talked about badges. We've talked about potentially scholarships as rewards or grants or like conference passes. So there's a lot of different ways we can try to help recognize people that have achieved this and try to help them get recognition in their career. Anyone have any additional institutions or groups we think we would like to try to engage? Judy.
I just wanted to say one of the best training that I've ever had was actually mentorship. And I don't know if we've considered that. I mean, we all have a team of people around us who probably would love to mentor somebody, and how cool it would be to mentor somebody from outside your organization, like a student. I know I had a mentor. I actually had a few mentors when I was in college. I called them my board of mentorship, my career mentorship. Mm-hmm. But I think it is fantastic, maybe if we could engage our own companies to offer mentorship. I don't know if that's something we could consider, but certainly it could be something for the hands-on approach. I think maybe Brian or Eric mentioned earlier that's lacking.
I think that's an excellent line. We've mentioned that a few times. The Boggle, and speaking as a mentor, it's not very scalable. So if it's just going to be the 9 of us here as the mentors, we're rapidly there'll be more people interested in help than hours we have to give. So I like the idea of potentially reaching out to our organizations.
Yeah, not us. I mean, and all of us are not suited.
Correct.
It is a big thing, and there is a matching program, I suppose, that would have to be set up. So yes, I understand it's a lot of work, but also people in our organizations probably require mentorship skills to progress on their career and are looking to be mentors. Mm-hmm. There's a two-way, there has to be a win for both sides.
No, I think that's a great aspect of it. And that's not something that we've talked about, but haven't directly addressed as part of our learning paths. And mentorship is definitely something that would be valuable.
Sorry, folks, I have to drop for another call.
Cheers.
See you next week.
Vicky, since you're on the camera.
Yeah, so I don't know whether anyone is familiar with exorcism.io. I've dropped a link into the chat. It's a way to gain fluency in languages. And it's open source and free forever. And the way it does this is by exercises and mentors. And anyone who works with or uses exorcism.io instantly can be a mentor. And think of it like code review and giving feedback and stuff like that. It's highly effective. I think it has a really good model for this sort of stuff, for having a kind of constantly flowing pool of mentors to come and give feedback. And the exercise model works really well to help build up skills. And because it is open source in a very open and welcoming community, although it does not currently do things like skills rather than programming languages, I think it can be used for that, and they would probably be open to having those conversations. So it could be a really good way for us to present information and gain people to help us, whether they know it or not. If they're mentoring and helping others learn, that would really help move people along in that way. So that might be a way we can get some resources and a pre-made framework that we can just drop our content into.
That's interesting. We'll have to explore that. Thank you. David.
So someone had mentioned that we should list things that we want to say are out of scope. We've talked a lot about the in scope. Does anyone have any suggestions for out of scope?
Yeah, I mean, there needs to be a list, obviously, but I agree with the comment earlier that it should potentially remove like middle school for now, and start to look at. I think maybe we need to pick the length. If we're going to do specific learning around hands-on, we need to narrow it down to what languages we want to tackle first, because obviously there are quite a few. So we'll want to look at that in detail. I don't know if, is it also a conversation about breaking apart the existing training into modules?
Yep.
And tackling that, which ones will be at which phase. So, which ones are the first, say, 2 to 5, and then what's the roadmap down the line from there. So we may need to do some research in that context to fully answer this question, but I agree that it needs to be, broken up into tracks.
Even if out of scope may be the wrong phrasing, but we need to start our backlog, and something's going to get done first, and something is going to be at the bottom of the backlog, and we're going to constantly be adding to it. But we need, in order to make any progress, we're going to have to focus. And I think that'll probably be a conversation in the next month or so, is we'll want to target in on maybe 2 or 3 specific use cases for the training and focus in on that first. And then if other people want to work on other things in parallel, that's great. But the main group will focus in on X and Y, for example. So as always, I'll put in my note when we have the vote note. If anyone has any additional suggestions to anything we've talked about, feel free to go back in and type into the notes. In our last couple minutes, let's brainstorm a little bit, thinking about content delivery channels. So we have the fundamentals class already, and that exists in edX at the LF, and now is in SCORM format. So that's a definite awesome starting point for us. That also gives us a model of kind of classroom, air quotes here, classroom training. What other delivery channels do we have? I've scribbled down a couple. Feel free to agree or disagree with any of them, or add additional things that you have. So we have SKF, which is that labs-based learning. We'll definitely need some help with developers to write some additional labs. Vicky.
I want to make sure that anything we do look at as an option has existing facilities for internationalization and localization, because that's, if we go down a certain path and it's not necessarily simple, nothing is simple when translating is involved, but if it's already not built for that, then we're just going to be in for a world of hurt. So that should certainly be a criteria for anything we select. And I don't know whether our existing options have that or not. Or if so,
like
what's
edX
involved?
Class, like David's class, I think is just a translation exercise. We need to find those experts and they need to sit down and start keying through it. Like SKF, where it's more technical, I don't know, but Glenn is Dutch, so English is his second language. So maybe he inherently fought through some of those challenges. But I agree. We've talked about localization of content being a priority for us, kind of a guiding principle, and that's something we'll need to pay attention to. I absolutely agree. And any additional thoughts on ways we can deliver the content? We had Glenn suggested, and I think Eric mentioned it again, like a hackathon, but developer focused. Any other ideas we can think of how we would get this content out? It doesn't necessarily need to be the whole class, but it could be certain aspects. Contribute blogs for that thought leadership aspect.
I mean, you've got videos, right? That's obviously something that people are going to be interested in, and something that you can make relatively quickly and in small bite-sized chunks. I think another thing we need to consider is accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
So as we are doing these things, we need to make sure that not everyone has the abilities that we do necessarily, right? And so having things in a diversity of formats will allow more people to get to it. However, it also kind of, amplifies the localization problem. The more formats you have, the more ways you have to find to translate it. But
and speaking from experience, translation can be expensive.
It's super expensive because it's really hard to do, and that's worth paying for.
And especially in a technical realm where we have jargon and specific phrases, it might be a little bit more challenging to get translated to some languages.
Well, you have people who are specialized in that. Martha, go ahead.
Yeah, from practice of doing translations in open source for years, what is especially challenging is where programs change
Mm-hmm.
Then you get some parts that are translated, then you have messages that have been changed, the translation is not changed, or the translation is partially changed. Documentation, same thing. So that also applies to courses. If you want to make the course living, we need to have the translation in parallel, always ready to actually update the translation also when the main text changes, and that is a pretty important cost. I tried myself to do videos in bilingual to have the in English and have a French translation, and that's just a mess if you are changing something in that.
That's a great point, and that might be something we may need to have some people kind of go off and focus in. We may probably want to budget for something. It might not be a first year priority, but definitely second year, we want to be able to introduce that capability pretty quickly. And we probably should potentially budget for that. And maybe somebody's willing to fund that effort for us. Good points.
Or, maybe we can find a translation firm that
translation buddy.
Or another thing we can look at are, if we're already going to be partnering with various institutions and universities, mm-hmm. They all have language departments. Okay, and those students are going to need experience. And I think this could be a really good opportunity to help them get started.
That's interesting. I didn't even think about kind of enlisting the students. That'd be kind of fun.
Yeah,
I would more enlist students from the IT department in those translations than the students from the linguistics.
Because I'd look at linguistics. I certainly think that we would need to, for instance, if we need something translated to Chinese, we go to the Asian languages department. But if we're already embedded in the university, that makes it a lot easier, right? And however, if they want to collaborate with people from the IT department, that's fine too, right? It's just, there is a pool of people we could potentially pay some money and get some sort of, and teach them how to contribute to open source at the same time. I would love it if we could get more contributors who are there just to help translate open source projects and cool. Teaching linguistics and language learners how to do that. Oh man, that would be amazing.
Eric.
Yeah, this might actually be something to consider. I like both aspects, but as somebody who's 49 and working on his MBA, the concept of a lot of the components in the MBA start to talk through project management and other capabilities. Is this may be something you could easily turn into a project for like an international business major, somebody who's got to do project plans potentially either in a foreign language or will have to have some foreign language as part of their degree program. Maybe that's something as that could be talked about with these universities as a project focus, build out and maintain some of this. And the linguistics, obviously, +1 to Vicky on that, talk to, the Chinese teacher or whoever, some place that's relevant within the context. But I had another scope beyond the linguistic thing I was curious about in the training aspect. A number of us have submitted and been accepted at conferences coming up. Some conferences have ad hoc lightning talks and other things that could also be a training mechanism for this as well. And certainly I'd be interested to hear if anybody's going to DevOps World in September. Would we be having potentially a meeting to discuss the SIG or anything OpenSSF related, where maybe this could also be a topic that's brought up to a broader audience. And obviously there's a dozen other conferences where people could be discussing this as well, but so that'd be something. If anybody's going to that conference, maybe we can talk about putting something together.
And I think we also potentially could craft a library of lightning talks or birds of a feather kind of talk through talking points And as we have people that are going to some of these big conferences or submitting, we can have this library materials people could use and that has been reviewed and is kind of official content. I think that would be excellent. I'm not going to the DevOps World. I might be going to the OpenSSF Europe conference, though. But I think we need, and we talked about this in some of the working groups, is we have a conference list, and we probably across the board need to be more focused on and intentional. We want Dave to submit a talk at this conference to promote the best practices badge, for example, or whatever it is, so we can start to get some of these materials. And once we have this training materials, we will also want to start, that'll be an avenue for us to put out through conferences as well. All right, any additional thoughts before we close? I will look for an email from me. Well, I'm presenting for a conference in India tonight, so I'll have some time. So look for an email from me late tonight about voting. Yeah, I got suckered into it. Yay! But look for email from me. If you have any additional thoughts, please put them into the notes. And thank you, everybody. This has been some great conversations. I appreciate this. We're moving forward. And we will probably start to move into rebuilding the plan and filling out the details and specifics as next steps. And we'll be looking for owners or contributors. Thanks all. Cheers.